Welcome back to Sika Strength and welcome back to the Sika Stand news show every Monday, probably around 6 p.m. Today is brought to you by the Sika Strength app on iOS and Android, of course, but also by our new and nearly sold out merchandise launch. So this is our first of 2024 new graphic t-shirts. My personal favorite, I'm not going to lie, is the Ironworker. And then this is the 100th episode of the news show, which is pretty cute. So we've been doing this for nearly 2 years now. So coming up, I think on the 15th of August, we'll have done almost, that'll be like 104 or something. I think we've done some extras in there. So thanks for watching for nearly 2 years at this stage. We're watching 100 episodes of the new show. I had to go back and count all of them just to be sure. So we brought out this little t-shirt for the graphic in honor of that. You know, there's a lot of people tune in every week and people DM us a lot, so we're incredibly grateful for all of your help and all of the submissions you put in and your comments and your consistency in watching, and it means a lot to us and you people enjoy, so we are happy to keep doing the news show. Now, a frequent star on the news show, no stranger to the weightlifting world, probably one of the most popular weightlifters currently, certainly everyone's favorite, bad boy Carlos Nasar put up this 185 kilo snatch. Last week we talked about him doing 180 kilo snatch and saying there was nothing interesting about it. It's blasé, it's routine, it's casual, pedestrian. And then he puts up this 185 without straps, no less. 185 kilo snatch from the floor, which is 3 kilos over the world record held by Aleksi Lovchev currently.
Yeah, it's a funny point in Olympic prep for lifters. So you obviously see them all kind of peaking, all getting up towards those heavier weights. But this is also the point where if we start seeing things going wrong, concern starts to pop up. So unless things look absolutely unbelievable, people start putting question marks over people or wondering how their prep is going. Now, in Carlos's case, there's absolutely zero question marks because every week the lifts look the same. They're just a bit heavier. In that case, you would have to assume prep is going very, very well for him. Now, there are obviously some other stumbling blocks, making weight being a stumbling block, travel and just acclimatizing to the new area that you're going to be lifting in. Carlos obviously has the advantage of already being based in Europe, so that time zone difference won't be massive for him. But this is really the point where all the hay is in the barn. You can't really do a massive amount more training. You're not going to get massive increases in your numbers, but you can certainly mess up a training cycle.
Oh, you can. He also put up several attempts at 230 kilos, of which he didn't actually show us a successful attempt. Most successful attempt was this 230 kilos here, this last one he put up in his story. He lost two of them, one of them out front, one of them just wasn't really that close. The first one, he cleaned it several times, and I probably think he's made this after. We don't really know. That looked like a made attempt to me, but you can never be sure with the split jerk. So there's one thing I do want to say, and it's a bit of a touchy subject because it's like an open secret in weightlifting, I suppose, but I just hope nothing bad happens at the Olympics, because it's happened to us before. People remember 2012, you've been around for a while watching Olympics. We've had people putting up really big lifts in the lead up, and then unfortunate circumstances
They hurt their shoulders on the plane.
Yeah, some people hurt their back, weren't able to show up in lifting, or people had their medals taken away a few days after. So I am worried, I'm not going to lie. It is a new show. I obviously don't care if you've watched Sika Strength for long enough and you've watched 100 of these episodes. You know we could not give a fuck about PD use, but I do want to say I am a little bit touching wood. I hope nothing happens. He's lifting big weights and he's clearly training very hard, so I really hope nothing bad happens.
Yeah, it's one of those really strange aspects of weightlifting where you do have quite a lot of shaking and moving going on in the last month in relation to a couple of different things, but obviously the unmentionable is that you just never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to happen with testing. Obviously things have been attempted to being cleaned up, but obviously it just becomes more opaque and less clear as they kind of make a better facade on the front of weightlifting.
Now, we had Rizki posted this 200 kilo jerk double from the rack, so don't forget he's a 73 kilo lifter, and it's really going to be a toss-up between him and Hye Jeong for the gold and silver position. Bronze will actually be quite competitive, but unless these two gentlemen have a really bad day, Hye and Rizki, it's realistically 1 and 2. Now, who's going to be 1 and 2 is up to anyone's kind of chance. They're both very good snatchers. Hye Jeong historically was a fantastic clean and jerker, but some egregious injuries have laid him low, or from what we've seen up until recently. So we're probably looking at two individuals who are going to snatch 165 or more, or at least will probably need to snatch 165 or more. Realistically, if things keep going the way they're going, she's probably going to need something closer to 170 if he's going to clean and jerk what he's probably capable of at the moment. Whereas Rizki, he's going to need into those 200s. If he gets that 165, he could pip Hye Jeong, which would be very interesting. But these particular rack jerks are exceptionally nice, beautiful.
Yeah, they're absolutely gorgeous. That lockout is really one of the best in the game. An interesting fact here is that, so obviously going to the Olympics, being an Olympian is an amazing achievement for most athletes. It's something you dream about forever. For the top level guys then and girls, obviously, when they're going to the Olympics, medaling is the really important one. But a slightly kind of undertone to this is that depending on what country you're in, the monetary gain between a gold and a silver, there's drastic differences. So you could be talking about differences of 250 or 300,000 US dollars, depending if you come home with the gold medal or come home with the silver medal. So it is very much a thing now of, for guys at this level who know they're going to be medaling or have a chance of medaling, just those extra kilos, that 1 extra kilo on the snatch, those couple extra kilos on the clean and jerk is massively beneficial, not only to get the medal, which we know athletes care more about than anything else, but also that monetary gain, depending on what country you're in, depending what system you're in, is absolutely huge between a silver medal and a gold medal.
The last thing I want to talk about here is that if you think about how small he is an individual in terms of like 73 kilos, he's maybe 75 kilos here, maybe a little bit less. He's very, very lean as it is, and he's jerking 200 kilos for a double. When you think about how many people will never ever even deadlift 200 kilos, let alone squat 200 kilos, take it further to jerk 200 kilos and to rep 200 kilos on the jerk, and if you think about then the number of individuals who weigh 73 kilos who can do any of those things, is minuscule in terms of the world's population. So as easy as this looks for him, this is outrageously impressive.
Yeah,
massively impressive. Now moving over to South Korea, we have Yeon Hak doing 170 kilos for a double on the snatch. Yeon has a bit of up and down over the last year or so. We saw him do like 191 from the blocks last year, but he has had some injuries. He was injured when we saw him last year in Korea, and he seems to be on a pretty good comeback. So Worlds are on later this year, so this is the second time we've had Worlds on the same year as the Olympics. Normally we don't have it, but there's going to be Worlds on this year, and there'll be obviously a lot of lifters, the very small amount of lifters from the world scene who are making the Olympics. There's going to be lots of other lifters who are going to be training really, 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 really hard to make a statement, probably to put up some good numbers at Worlds, and when people will be inevitably comparing them to the Olympic champions. So I think Yeon might be one of those individuals.
Something I always find funny about Yeon's lifting, so it's always really good. Those weights are unbelievably impressive, but it always just looks kind of pedestrian for him. Mm-hmm. Like he never looks, like to be honest, when you see him snatch 100 kilos, kind of looks the same. It kind of looks like there's the same level of effort going in on 100 kilos than there is on the 170 for a double here. There's no crazy amounts of aggression. Obviously, it's very fast. Obviously, he's technically very, very nice a lifter, but it never looks crazy.
No, it doesn't. Now, so when he was going to the Olympics, we've got Park Hye Jeong. So she worked up to 132 kilos on the block snatch, kind of mid blocks, and then 175 kilo clean and jerk on the same block height as well. Big fan of those. We see the female side of things in the South Korean team really love blocks a lot more than they do for the male side, which was quite interesting. And she's obviously in very good condition for a medal, or very good favourite for a medal. And she hasn't been posting as much training lately, so we had that massive squat from her 270 last year, or maybe a little bit before that. So she's exceptionally strong. We haven't seen any new squats from her, but she always hits these big lifts from blocks. And again, she's very, very young. I think she's probably about 22 at the moment. So she has a very bright future ahead of her. Probably another 2 Olympic blocks or cycles if she so wishes. But a very reassuring lifting here from her also.
One thing here, when you look at the jerk, so a lot of time we'll get normal lifters, not elite international lifters, and they'll be doing a very short, shallow, aggressive dip and drive on their jerk, emulating lifters such as Park here. So really short and aggressive. In this case, though, it's a female bar, so a 15 kilo bar, narrower diameter, and it's 175 kilos on the barbell. So obviously, with the shorter, more aggressive and faster dip and drive here, she's able to put a lot of bend into the bar and then utilize that stored energy that's in that bent steel to kind of shoot the bar up overhead. Now, the unfortunate thing is, unless you're doing that with 175 kilos, and particularly 175 kilos on a female bar, you don't get that same effect from that shorter, sharper dip and drive. So it is always important when you're looking at videos like this, maybe you're looking at that really nice sharp dip and drive for the jerk. Unless you're doing those colossal weights, unless it's that narrower diameter barbell, you probably won't get the same effect from it.
Now, the Lee Sang section of the new show, formerly known as the Artyom Anchipov section of the new show, we have Lee Sang Yeon squatting 220 kilos for a double. Super impressive. He's a 73 kilo lifter, very, very lean lifter. So again, probably pretty close to that 73 kilo category. He's obviously training very, very hard for Worlds later this year also. We don't see a lot of front squats from Lee, or if we do, it's kind of make that 190, 200 for reps. So this is probably the heaviest we've seen from him in a long time. So 220 kilos for a double. Noticeably a lot deeper on the depth in these compared to his back squat, which is pretty deep as it is, but these are kind of that clean bottom position depth, which is interesting that he squats deeper on these, and these are very aesthetic, very pleasing. Front squats are very interesting because a front squat can be both impressive but very unaesthetic, and it's kind of hard to watch sometimes. When you get someone do a really nice front squat, it is really takes the biscuit. Probably because I think your brain appreciates just how hard it is to make a front squat look nice, especially if you're doubling 220 kilos.
Yeah, absolutely. Another weird thing with this that I didn't notice in any of his back squat videos, I'm not sure what's giving me this information, but it looks like his heels are really high up on these. So when you look at it, it just looks like he's very much weight forward in his shoe. I'm not sure if he does have like an extra heel raise inside in his shoe, but it just looks like his weight is very far forward on his foot. Obviously on his back squats, his weight is very centered, maybe even slightly further back. But on those, it just looks like he's putting that weight a bit far forward.
I'd say that's because he's just squatting deeper.
Yeah, probably.
I'd say because his knees are traveling further forward, and he's probably getting a bit more internal rotation at the bottom.
Bloody gorgeous is what it is.
Yeah. He's using his Dr. Magnus, don't you know? Have you heard everyone talk about internal rotation, knee valgus?
No, it's actually grand.
No, it's perfect. So next up, we've got Aleksi Lovchev put up a few big lifts. So the Russians are training big crop lifters, big crop of young lifters. We've got some OGs, which we've seen over the last few news shows. And look, Aleksi was really one of the more unfortunate ones. Him, Apti and Artyom, I think, were three of the biggest kind of people who missed out from the testing and the political fallout in the last couple of years as individuals, of course. Aleksi, I think, was probably one of the people who in his prime would have really put it up to Lasha in his prime. There's lots of great supers lifting now, of course, and we'll see those in Paris, but Aleksi had a positive test in 2017 after he clean and jerked the world record to 64, tested positive for a peptide. Then he did strongman, then he came back, then he dislocated his elbow, then we had the country ban from Russia. So in the domestic scene, he was just never really going to push himself that hard. He went and did strongman a lot while he was on his ban, came back to some very good lifts. So it was always very interesting. Never forget he snatched 220 from blocks. 220 from blocks, clean and jerked the world record in competition. So we really don't know. I think he's one of the biggest would have beens. I think we saw Artyom Oklov, Apti Okanov all hit some very, very big numbers in competition. I think we got a good idea of what they were capable of, but I feel like Lovchev was someone who we could have seen a bit more from. But be that as may, here's a 190 snatch from him.
Yeah, and just looking at this 190, like obviously in super heavyweight weightlifting on the male side, the comparison is always to Lasha. And we've seen Lasha with his 190s in the last few weeks. We've seen Lasha moving weights, obviously heavier again this week. But you'd have to imagine that if Lovchev was in the position to be going to the Olympics, this would be even better than how good that already looks. Like, it looks very, very strong. It doesn't look like he's under pressure at all. Obviously, the standing up out of the bottom of that squat looks a bit more difficult than what you see from someone like Lasha, but you have to imagine he'd be right up there in the running for it.
Then on top of that, though, I'd wonder if the elbow dislocation was inevitable, would it have capped him anyway? Because what seemed to have really stopped the big lifts was he was on the comeback and he was going for big lifts in competition, but then he did that 230. So if that had happened anyway, but you'd have to imagine it would have, if he was training even harder for internationals, would it have been cut short anyway? Like, we haven't really seen him. We don't particularly know now if the elbow's affecting his top lifts, or, which I might be. You know, we saw someone like Am Young Chul come back from a dislocation and lifts really well. So it might be affecting him, or it might just be the situation he's in, or a combination of both. It is really would have never, coulda, woulda, shoulda, never, but it didn't. But here's a 220 clean and jerk as well. Always out for me was his clean was exceptionally dynamic, especially for a super. You don't get many supers moving that fast under the barbell, timing it that well, and it really stood to him on those heavy clean and jerks.
Now, the other funny thing with this is that jerk looks almost like a push press. Like, he is driving that barbell overhead. Obviously, he was in strongman for a while, and that would have massively helped with that overhead strength. But you'll see here just how much of that looks to be an upper body press.
Yeah, he's definitely supporting the weight in a non-ideal way after that break. So, unfortunate, but alas, the new show must move on there. We must continue.
We must move on.
We've got Sunnat, or Usarov Sunnat, who is a Uzbek lifter with this what I think is 175. So I think there's two 1.25s on either side. So beautiful lift, super strong, always very, very solid in the pull under. But something about his snatch is very aesthetic. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's a beautiful snatch, and obviously incredibly heavy as well.
For me, it's that catch position. The catch is so strong. He looks under no pressure at any point once he has got that barbell.
Are you saying one slightly short elbow extension is okay on one side?
Yes.
Okay.
Probably because I'm hanging out with you so much.
Oh.
Hey, there it is.
He threw it out there.
He's also jacked.
He is pretty jacked.
Jackedness makes a big difference for how aesthetic the lift looks, in my opinion.
Someone suggested last week on the live stream that I should paint my shed that beige colour like them or an alien Kazakhstan. It might be an extra bit of strength. So it could be, although the hard face ply I have at the moment is that kind of beige colour. So maybe it's already helping.
For me personally, I think it's the two-tone effect. You know, where you get a different colour on the bottom than on the top.
You know, there were some psychological studies which we know are terrible forms of science, but there was this idea that you couldn't paint this colour pink in opponents' dressing rooms because it made you temporarily weaker, because apparently it relaxed you psychologically.
Yeah.
But obviously psychology and studies are, you know, rampant with terrible studies.
Oh,
but,
an interesting one, Owen.
But
it's an interesting point of view.
But they actually banned it in some league. I'm not sure what it was, because a load of were painting the opponent's dressing room pink in the hopes that it would make them softer.
What they also do is paint the home dressing room like a red, and then they'd have a very beige or maybe a light baby blue in the away dressing room. So I think for a lot of leagues now, they just have a standard rule that the decor in each changing room has to be the same.
Okay. Baby blue.
Baby blue.
Sticking with the same training hall, we've got the original horse, Akbar Djuriev, with a 290 kilo double bounce squat. Now, I'm not sure if he meant to do this or was just heavy. He did suffer from the cut to 102 more than I would have thought. So we saw him kind of on the come up when he was at 105, really strong. We saw him 109, super strong, super heavyweight, super strong. The cut to 102 has been tough. He did have a back injury he picked up while he was a super heavyweight. You know, there's a video of him on Trokedy's channel a couple of years ago, and he's repping 280 or 290, but he's like powering through those reps. Now, obviously 102 is a hard cut for him. He's a big individual. So we haven't seen any lifts from him recently. We don't really know what he's capable of. He's a hot favourite, in my opinion, for a 102 medal. Maybe a 102 gold. It's really hard to say, but this is the only thing we've got from him, and probably the only thing we will get from him.
It's difficult. It's a hard situation to be in, where for many people going up a weight class or adding maybe 10 kilos and lifting there for a while will make a massive improvement to your lifts, and then you can cut down quite successfully in many cases. Now, in this case, for me personally, I think going up to that kind of 120 mark, it's just a bit too much.
But you're 120 right now?
No, him going up to that 120.
Yeah.
Obviously, when I take my drifts up around 140 kilos, I feel great. But I think that drop is just a bit too much. Like, he was very much on the come up, like Owen was talking. Those lifts seem to be getting better and better. He maintained his physical condition amazingly well as he went up to being a super. By no means did it look like he wasn't carrying the weight well. It didn't look like he was slowing down, which we've heard other athletes talking about, going up a weight class and feeling slow because of it. In Akbar's case, he looked to be really thriving or flourishing as a super. So it is yet another case for a 112 kilo weight class. It's what the people want.
Yeah, it's a tumultuous time for him, and you know, next Olympic quad, he's still a young lifter. They need to just tell them what it is, show them really far ahead of the time, and this is where it is. You need years to develop into those classes, and if you're cutting a weight class, you need quite literally 3 or 4 years to really maximize it. You know, I know some of them had time, but they didn't have enough time. Gaining weight is one thing, you still need lots of time to maximize that. But if in comparison, you know, to this 242 before Tokyo, where he's absolutely demolishing weights, look at that clean.
Yeah. You know, I think it's so unfair. Like, obviously we know the reasons that they changed the weight class in weightlifting. They want a bit of a clean slate. They want to wipe off those records from previous groups of lifters. But I think it's very, very unfair. Like, if you're a 100-meter sprinter, there's been a lot of positive tests in 100-meter sprinting, and by no means did they then suddenly make it the 90-meter sprint or 100-yard sprint.
The 101-meter sprint.
The 101-meter sprint. You know, those athletes get to train for their entire career knowing that distance they're going to run, and in many cases, the weight classes are a similar kind of thing. You shouldn't really be allowed to mess around with them that much. I think it crumbles the foundation of the sport a small bit.
It's definitely fucked a lot of lifters. And the YouTube algorithm hates cursing, but that's the only way to describe it. Now, thankfully, super heavies are always and forever left untouched since the dawn of time. So next up, we've got Lasha. So he put up this 210 kilo snatch, or rather his physio, Dr. George, he put up this 210 kilo snatch. Also put up this 240 kilo clean and jerk and a 252 kilo clean and jerk, and a 270 kilo double on the front squeezy, the front squatsy. They seem to be finishing their building project, I've noticed most notably.
They do. It looks lovely outside as well, doesn't it?
It does. It actually looks really nice.
I remember when those apartments had that plastic sheeting in front of it. But one thing, and it's come back to me numerous times over the last month or so as we're seeing Lasha's prep going on, the line or the phrase in my head that I come back to every single time was when Owen was talking to Anton, and Anton talked about Lasha just made the weights every single week. Every single week they got heavier. He was always sore. Everybody else was sore. But Lasha made the weights every single time. And that's exactly what we're seeing on this prep here again. We just see heavier and heavier attempts being made in this case, and particularly on the snatch, being made very, very well. Like, his snatch is looking far, far better than it looked a year ago. So it is great. It fills me with confidence that we're going to see Lasha in prime form at the Olympics.
Yeah, definitely. He's got a few weeks left, not many. I think like 3 weeks left now. The week before the competition isn't really going to do much, but these next 2 weeks he could get a little bit more. Looking at these now, I'm still kind of set on that 260. I originally said 218, but I could see a 220 coming out of this, possibly. I'd like to see a 220 in person, so that would be nice.
I think I said 221 was or 222.
People are so optimistic for him, and I love the enthusiasm, but it is, again, it comes up every week in the comments with the 500, but be that as it may, what I want from him is a gold medal and retire, and he loses weight and he spends time with his kids, and everyone remembers his illustrious career. Yeah. And he had a great time, and he broke massive boundaries for the human race. Nobody thought. When Krasov snatched 216, we were waiting around for people to snatch 217 for years. Then Salimi snatched in 2011, and everyone was like, well, that's it for years. And then Lasha came along and was like, hang on now a second, lads. I'm actually just going to add 8 kilos to this. So you have to appreciate that. While we mightn't see peak Lasha at the end of this Olympics, we've definitely seen one of the greatest humans to touch a barbell, assuming he's retiring, which I think he probably is.
what I really like about Lasha as well is we've seen the same crew of people with him the entire time.
That's true, yeah.
We've seen Dr. Georgie there. We've seen his coaches there. They're always the same crew. It's always the same entourage with him. And I think that leads to a lot of his success, or he's probably gleaned a lot of success from that. You've people around you who understand you. You've people around you who know what works best for you. And you're not kind of going into these different environments. Obviously, we've seen it with some of the greatest weightlifters ever in the past, where they might chop and change due to circumstances outside of their control, or circumstances that they directly influence because they wanted to go to a different coach or anything like that. And I think in most cases that doesn't work out too great.
What would be really cool is to see a Lasha who went a different direction and just went deadlifting and did the relevant things for deadlifting.
Yeah.
That would be very interesting.
I hope he doesn't do that now, though.
No, just retire.
Yeah.
Apparently he loves trucks.
Class.
Next up, we've got Amanda
Schott.
I was going to say Schott.
Schott?
But she's Brazilian. So a Brazilian lifter snatching 103 kilos. And the funny thing about this was, I don't think Dara was expecting this. So when we were organising the news show, he literally went, whoa.
This is so good. The woe-ness on this. So obviously 103 kilos snatch is amazing. Snatch that looks this good and looks this easy is amazing. But the big thing here for me, technically speaking, is when we see how aggressive the hip contact is, yet how vertical the bar path is. So a lot of time we get a lot of that hip drive into the barbell at that point of contact. We see a big swinging bar path, and some people make it work, but we see massive hip contact here, yet really good vertical bar path, no swinging of the barbell, really nice vertical pull over the head. It's a phenomenal snatch.
What I really like about Amanda's snatch here is if you watch the back position she achieves before she pulls, and then she maintains it throughout the lift, and not only through the extension or through the pull, which a lot of people think about, but don't forget how important being solid in the catch position is. And you'll see as she stands up, she's still keeping that extension in her back, a really strong back position. Flexion your back is no bueno on the stand up or in the catch position. It really puts the barbell out of position, even if you're a horse. So this is a beautiful lift for sure.
The anti-fragility people are screaming at their YouTube right now.
Now you can catch a barbell in flexion. So here we have got Ozbek. He's a Turkish lifter. A good opportunity, good shoe-in for bronze, I think, unless Rizki and Hye Jeong have a terrible session. He's 73 kilo lifter. We have this 156 and 195 kilo clean and jerk. He is very consistent in competition, really good in competitions. You know, he's been putting up those numbers for the last few comps. My personal hope is that Suarez gets the bronze. He's definitely capable of numbers like this. He's been, cutting hard to that 73 Ritvars. So while they're both great lifters, and I hope they do very well, my personal hope is for bronze is Ritvars, even though we haven't seen any training from him really.
Yes. The funny thing here with Ozbek is we get somebody who is right at the far edge of a spectrum in terms of his morphology. So we see long torso, short legs, like we always talk about, being very beneficial for weightlifting. We see very short arms and very short shins as well here. So you'll see kind of technical aspects or technical quirks that won't work as well for a lot of people. But in his case, he seems to be making it very, very easily. Now, the other interesting aspect here is the amount of elbow extension he has. So he's probably hyperextended by around 10 degrees on both elbows on the snatch, and he certainly has a level of hyperextension on the jerk then as well that we wouldn't commonly see. Now, can that cause issues for some lifters? Absolutely. In his case, he seems to be thriving with it, but definitely that level of overextension where we just get a little bit of instability in the elbow once it goes beyond that fully neutral range can cause some issues, particularly on the recovery of the lift. So in many cases, they'll catch the lift quite well, but as they stand up from the snatch or as they recover and bring their feet back together on the split jerk, it can cause some issues, just some fluttering or some movement of the elbow. And it just depends what the judging is like at the Olympics.
Yeah, it also goes into the scary zone where you're like, oh no.
Super scary.
Now, moving on, we've got Yeon Djuris, who is a very, 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 very strong individual. You would have seen him on the news show quite a bit, and he's been doing some very heavy trapbar deadlifts, and he appears to have done the heaviest trapbar deadlift from the floor. Dare I say a world record trapbar deadlift of 505 kilos, or 1,105 pounds for the Americans and Canadians, who you mustn't forget also like pounds. So 505 kilos, massive lift. I think this is a
Colossal.
world record.
Yeah.
World record trap bar deadlift.
What I really like at the end is you see the celebration isn't massively over exuberant because I assume he's going to faint.
Possibly.
You just see him kind of go for it. He's really happy, but then it's not this big shout. We've all been there with crazy heavy deadlifts, obviously nowhere near 500 kilos, but where you don't really want to go crazy afterwards. Now, I absolutely adore trap bar deadlifts. We use them somewhat frequently with our athletes, but the great thing about a trap bar deadlift is you can strap yourself in and you can pull as hard as you want. In my opinion, once you maintain a good lower and mid back position on a trap bar deadlift, you're pretty good just to go crazy and try and pull that bar off the ground as much as you possibly can. That's why you see it used in so many kind of scientific studies where people are looking at big bipedal force production. It's because in many cases you can get a lot of athletes in, you can get a lot of athletes to lift quite heavily, and you don't have to rely quite so much on technique as you would in a standard conventional deadlift setup.
Yeah, we don't really use it with people, but Dara, for some reason, on a personal level, really enjoys trap bar deadlifts. Is it because you can just go all out without thinking about it?
100%.
That's fair enough. I respect that. Now, John Hack is on an absolute tear at the moment for a competition. So we covered his last peak in a separate video, and he had another competition, which was about 8 weeks later. So we're coming up on that pretty soon. And he posted this 245 kilo bench press. And we also had this 345 kilo back squat, and what really jumped out at me from the back squat here is this looks a little bit deeper than usual. So John is always just below parallel. He does a high bar squat obviously, but it's not, ass to grass, whatever you want to call it, but this looks notably deeper than he usually squats, and very, very confident. 345, looking really good.
I notice here he's not wearing any knee sleeves or wraps.
No, he's wearing knee sleeves under the pants.
Oh, is he wearing one under the pants?
Yeah, I think you can see.
Oh, he's going for the little sneaky knee sleeve.
Yeah, the cheater knee sleeves. But he didn't go for the cheater belt. He put the belt on the outside.
I don't think you can cheater belt a lever.
Yeah, it does look like there's knee sleeves underneath that.
Yeah, maybe there is.
Yeah, you can't really cheater belt the lever, can you?
No.
Well, you could just pop it over.
Look, I think I'm going to say what everyone's thinking here, and we want to see 104 kilo John Hack going to competition and absolutely smashing weights.
I think he said he wants to do one more at like 90 or 89, one more competition. And then he said he's going to move up. So it'd be really crazy. So you also had this 400 kilo deadlift. And this looks kind of similar to what all his other heavy deadlifts look, around 400 kilos. Like the difference between this and like 426 he made is very, very similar. So it's really hard to get a judge on what he's going to be able to do. And he does seem to be able to make those big jumps on the deadlift in terms of progression, but also in that same session. So it's really hard to get a predictor on what he might end up hitting after this. His technique stays really consistent. He doesn't really have any technical breakdown in his deadlift. It just slows down, which is definitely what you want technically for any of your lifts. You don't want to get an altered position. You want to practice the same position over and over, and you want your regression in position to be non-existent. You just want slightly slower barbell speed, because that is the way you will lift the most weight you can end up lifting. He doesn't want the technique that only shows up at 400 kilos. He wants to practice the technique that he has all the time, so he knows then when he gets to 420 he can both rely on himself and not have to think about that technique, but also those specific joint angles and positions are very, very strong. So when he gets to a place where it gets a little bit harder, he can rely on and regress to those same positions. So he's not regressing anywhere, but he knows he just has to, for want of a better word, hang on for a little bit longer or put a bit more force to those same positions. And your body gets so good at improving on those. And consistency in technique is super important, especially in powerlifting when you're in a competition, when there's a big environment, it's really hyped up, your adrenaline is really high, or you're really fatigued by the end of the day. So maybe you're deadlifting the last session, the end of the day, it could be 8-9 hours later, and you're in a position where you need to be able to rely on yourself to have that same consistent technique. And I think John Hack is a great example of that, where, to be honest, on any of the lifts we don't really see any technical breakdown.
Now, whatever with the lift looking good, he's looking incredibly lean as well. Like, he has anterior delt striations and tricep striations.
He also looks bigger, doesn't he?
Yeah, he looks massive.
Next, we've got another exceptionally good deadlifter with technique, is Natalie from Team Australia, or Team Australia in the IPF, with a 280 kilo mixed grip conventional deadlift, which, similar to John Hack, slows down, but her technique would look the exact same way with lighter weights. If you go back and look at them, it's just keeps on grinding but keeps holding good positions, and that's why one of the reasons she's deadlifting massive weights like this.
Now, an interesting thing when you look at this deadlift, so obviously in weightlifting we have a barbell accelerating as it comes into the hip. In powerlifting we see the barbell decelerating as it comes into the hip, and where a lot of people lose it, or where a lot of people get a no lifting competition, is they'll get to that point of almost being locked out, and then they'll go for something that's probably a bit too aggressive, probably has a bit too much dynamism in it, and they'll go for that big kind of lockout at the end. Now in this case we'll see Natalie with a very, very controlled lockout. She's waiting for the down command, or probably her coach to give a down command here. She keeps squeezing through the barbell. In my opinion, we don't see the barbell stop moving at any point during that deadlift. It keeps moving very slightly, but the most important thing is she keeps bringing her shoulders back and her hips forward. So she knows at the top of the rep, this is the make or break period. This is the most important part of the deadlift for her, and she keeps squeezing through. She's not worrying about grip. She's not worrying about her hands popping off the bar. She's not worried about really aggressively locking out her hips and squeezing her glutes and pushing through, which we see many other lifters doing. In her case, it's very controlled. She continues to maintain that really good back posture and keeps squeezing through until she's in that fully locked out position, and then brings the bar down.
Now, next up, we've got Theo Zilla again. So you might remember Theo did 240 kilos for a set of 10 barefoot, and he posted this video of him squatting 300 kilos, and he fails at multiple attempts, different sessions. One session, he fails at high bar, and then he comes back and does it low bar and makes the rep in this very interesting fashion. So you can see these high bar failures here, 300 kilos, a couple of different sessions, 3, 4, 5 times, and he misses it with the low bar in this same session, then comes back and makes it, which is mental. That's crazy. Very nice, successful make then as well.
Yeah, it's a really good looking squat. Like, what I really like on his squat in particular, and we've seen it in previous videos, when he's in the low bar position, he still does a great job of maintaining back angle. So obviously in a low bar position we tend to have more of an inclined forward torso angle, but in many cases we'll see athletes going more inclined as they go down towards the bottom position, and then as they stand up they'll maintain that forward inclination as they stand up, utilizing obviously their posterior chain, their hamstrings, their glutes, their back, all of that good stuff. Now in his case, he seems to maintain somewhat of a forward torso angle, but he doesn't change that torso angle throughout the entire lift, and this means the back can maintain a much better position, and also he doesn't have to overly rely on the posterior chain. He can keep those quads engaged, keep the legs working the entire way through the squat, and obviously leads to a successful 300 kilo squat.
Barefoot squatting is something that's quite interesting. It feels very good for some people, and it just really depends. The better you are at squatting, the better it'll probably feel for a lot of people. Some people who are hypermobile generally will feel okay in this compared to the shoes, but if we take people who are decently strong and then pushing into the realms of very strong, sometimes you will see those individuals will really enjoy squatting barefoot. Now, for pretty much everyone we ever see, we ever coach and interact with, and I've yet to see a case where someone is the opposite. Weightlifting shoes or squatting shoes are just far better in general for people to squat in. It just makes such a big difference. They'll last you forever. If you're just squatting in weightlifting shoes, they'll last you for years. You can get them very, very cheap or very, very expensive. You can pay €80 or you can pay €380 if you order things like the Asics from Japan, which we will be doing at some stage for review. But the main thing is weightlifting shoes are cheap, super convenient to have, and they make a massive difference to your squat. And if you haven't tried them yet, I would encourage you. You will quite literally after a few sessions be like, oh, this is actually a massive difference. Now, there is one note, is that sometimes when people are a little bit less mobile than they normally would be, or they're not used to it, and they put on their weightlifting shoes, it feels much better. Then they go crazy with squatting. Sometimes we do see an inflammation of certain muscle groups. We might see the quad tendon tighten up a little bit. We might see an irritation of the patella tendon. And this is a load management. So when you get the weightlifting shoes, just be super cautious. Dial back the weight a lot unless you absolutely have to go heavy. Just get used to those positions, get used to that new range of motion, get used to those kind of reps and sets, that new style of squatting, and then build up again. But don't put them in and immediately go really heavy. I'm
very much in that camp of people who hate squatting barefoot.
I really like it. It feels very nice sometimes.
I think what you're talking about there is being good at squatting or not.
So next up we've got Will Hobson of the Harlequins rugby team benching 150 for a set of five speed reps. He is 21 years old.
A couple of interesting things here with this video. So what we see here is we see what we'd refer to as close grip bench pressing. But it's standard grip bench pressing, roughly shoulder width. He obviously has long arms. Long arms are very, very useful for playing ball sports or team sports. In general, you tend to have a longer reach for tackling, catching people, catching rugby balls, all that good stuff. Now, long arms lead to your bench press being more difficult, and a slightly narrower grip makes that more difficult again. But in this case, it's probably the best way of training general upper body strength. So coming straight out from the shoulders, maintaining that good forearm angle the entire time. You see he does it very, very well here. He maintains great wrist positions. And then the final piece of this is it looks like there's a slight incline on the bench. Now, I'm not sure if this is just the angle of the video, but it looks like that bench is slightly inclined up. I could be wrong on that though.
Now, lastly, we have got two wrestlers from South Korea. One is 74 kilos, and the other is 130 kilos, sorry. And both of them are moving very fast, but also the 130 kilo fella is moving at crazy speed. So we're used to seeing really lean, muscular 70, 80 odd kilo wrestlers going through their drills on the mats and moving as fast as possible. They're practicing their single legs, they're sprawling. But then we have this absolute unit who's 130 kilos sprawling, practicing his single legs as fast as possible, and he is moving way faster than he's any right to be moving.
Oh my god, imagine how dangerous that would be. Imagine you just go to your no-gi jiu-jitsu competition, you see that guy standing on the other edge of the mat, you've weighed in as an ultra heavy, and then you see that little knee slide coming at you.
Well, I have weighed in it and in the ultra heavies for jiu-jitsu competitions, so I can tell you that could possibly happen. So wrestlers are well known for their really intense training, their really intense conditioning, their ability just to take any form of training and make it super intense, whether that's the weight training they're doing, their technical practice, their conditioning. It's a testament to the sports, but the really interesting thing about that is that could have happened to any sport, but it just so happens that a load of psychopaths do wrestling, and that's the minimum standard for the culture's work ethic. So everyone who does wrestling understands that this is the minimum level of intensity. You know, we covered some wrestlers from the Uzbekistan recently. Was it Uzbekistan?
I think so.
We covered some of the wrestlers there, and they were crazy intense training. You know, we've seen Russian wrestlers, you've seen people like Krellin, we've seen the American wrestlers routinely going crazy, Iranian wrestlers, and you've all just set the standard for, if you want to win at any level of competition, you know, there's quite literally high school wrestling in America. The level of intensity they bring to their training is so high that now the minimum work standard is crazy. So this is a requisite for training, is just to go hard as possible for as much as possible.
I love it.
It's crazy. It's crazy how that happened to a specific sport though.
It's funny as well, like they'll talk about 3-hour long training sessions where they're doing this intensity of conditioning work for 3 hours. And you see, they always look like this. They're always drenched in sweat. The mats are always covered in sweat. There doesn't seem to be any easy days in wrestling.
No, there's also probably a lot of staff in wrestling too. So I hope you enjoyed today's news show. Of course, don't forget to check these out. I'll be honest with you, they've been up for sale since last Tuesday, and most of them nearly gone already. So I reckon by after this news show, they're going to be gone. We're going to be taking them off the website soon anyway, because most of the stock is gone. So do please get them while you have a chance. We're incredibly appreciative of all your support. Don't forget to check out the Sika Strength app on iOS and Android. And as always, please do keep sending in the DMs for the news show. If you see anything, weightlifting, anything in powerlifting, anything in athletes doing anything, please send it in to us, because you would not believe how much better it makes the news show. I know it takes about an hour and a half most days to go through it, and I'm very happy to do that. So don't even think about it. If you don't get a message back from us, don't worry about it. We've seen it, we'll like it, or whatever I get a chance. So just send it to us, whatever it is. You don't know how interesting it is. Something like this is very, very interesting. You know, we don't spend a lot of time perusing the internet because we're too busy, but if one person sees one thing and you send it in, you know, there's 10,000 of you approximately every week who watch. So if you send in something interesting, just DM us on Instagram. Don't be afraid. We are very grateful. None of them are annoying or anything like that. We really appreciate those messages. So please do send them in, because it's all great fodder for the news show. And this is very entertaining and a little bit scary for some people, I imagine.
Thanks, guys.